Hello Channel viewers, I am DS, a psychologist, and welcome to another episode on Channel NITT. In this episode, I am going to address a very serious misconception of the ENTJ as portrayed by many non-ENTJ YouTubers. So I'm going to break the discussion of what an ENTJ really is into two parts. So if you have been watching a lot of other MBTI videos and know a little bit about the ENTJ, let me tell you, most of the things that you have learned will be wrong. Yes, I would agree that as an ENTJ, I am very decisive, but a lot of other adjectives used to describe the ENTJ may not hold. Personally, I believe that the ENTJ is a very complex individual. Not all the time do we want to be a leader. We can sometimes settle for being a follower. Quite a lot of times I find myself being bold, but a lot of other times I am really conservative. If you think that being unkind is considered ruthless or heartless, then yes, we are heartless and ruthless because we are generally unkind. But we have kind moments. And I also do not think that we are heartless or ruthless most of the time. Only when pushed the limit, then we may have those kind of qualities. So as an ENTJ, while most of the time I am logical, a lot of times I also find myself to be irrational, especially in the eyes of other people. So the ENTJ is really a very complex and unpredictable individual. So in our brain, we have a very elaborate flowchart with layers of decision-making algorithm. And a lot of people probably will not understand this kind of intricate decision-making process unless you are an INTJ. So earlier, I mentioned that some of the decisions that I make could be irrational, but afterward, it might seem logical. You will call this vision or insight. So this consistent inconsistency of the ENTJ makes the ENTJ a very dangerous player in this jungle. So of all the 16 types, I think the ENTJ is one of the most unpredictable ones. And this is why a lot of people can also be very suspicious of the ENTJ. So if I were to summarize this, I would say that the ENTJ is an individual that is very highly evolved to adapt to circumstances and situations. So in general, the INTJ is very likely to stay out of social events that make them uncomfortable, but the ENTJ sometimes will stay out, but sometimes are very eager to participate. And that is even if it were uncomfortable for the ENTJ. But if we have decided to partake an event, we usually do our best or go all in. So it can sometimes be a show hand mode. So as ENTJs, we evaluate our success rate of partaking a particular event very quickly. So in most of the time when we decide to do something, whether it's a big thing or a small thing, we will actually mentally evaluate whether pursuing that thing is worthwhile at all. So even for very small events, such as whether we want to talk you down or whether we want to join somebody for a lunch, there could be a lot of variety of reasons. It could be political reasons. It could sometimes just be reasons as simple as we want to humor ourselves to see how you will react. So that being said, the ENTJ can be circumstantial bullies. But most of the time, we choose to hide in the background for many obvious reasons. So these obvious reasons could be to preserve harmony in the group, not to alert our competitors, and to conserve our resources. But if we choose to go on the offensive, it can also happen for a variety of reasons and in a variety of situations. So as an ENTJ, I found myself to be on the offensive when provoked or even without being provoked. A lot of reasons for this. One, sometimes is to show that we are no pushovers. At other times, we do it because we can. And at other times, we offend a particular person in front of a crowd to warn the other people not to approach us. I think that if you understand this, it's a very animalistic instinct. While most of the time we appear very domesticated, civilized, at other times, I think that the ENTJ can really be a very big bully. So we choose who to bully and what circumstances in which we can do it. So not necessarily so do we pick on the weak ones. Sometimes we can also challenge the bigger bullies. So when we decide to go on the offensive, it is not a rash decision. we would have probably evaluated in our head whether this is worthwhile. We have done a cost-benefit analysis. So this means that we have assessed the situation and determined how this situation may benefit us or damage the other person. I think this decision may come very easily because the ENTJ can actually be a very judgmental creature. So our decision-making process can be very complex and intricate. Nonetheless, the decision-making process is very quick and fast. That is why we are decisive. Nonetheless, because we balance so many different factors into the decision-making process, a lot of times, what decision we eventually make may become a shock to other people. But it is definitely not a shock to us. The ENTJ can be a very judgmental creature. Most of the time, when we want to do something against a particular person, we would have already made an assessment of the person based on how we put this person into our tier. So we have a mental tier where we put people into different boxes. It could be classified in terms of whether you are a low-class person or a higher class person. So not necessarily status. We can judge whether you are a weak person or a person who is actually weak but pretending to be strong, and so we will know whether you are worth any attack or whether there is any effect if we attack you. And this mental classification really helps the ENTJ in making very quick decisions. We already have a concept of who this person is, so at the moment of time when we decide whether we want to shout at a person or we just want to keep quiet and hold our horses, we really rely on this mental schema or mental representation of that particular person to see whether it is worth a fight. So while the INTJ usually stays out of this kind of a conflict, they do not want to partake any of this kind of an event because they don't like it, but the ENTJ usually behaves otherwise. It's very circumstantial. I think that this is because the ENTJ is actually more primitive, instinctive and cannibalistic than the INTJ. So what I have described in this episode really talks about most ENTJs in general, because many ENTJs in life do not rise to the top where they can assume leadership. So because I no longer belong to an organization, I also feel competent enough to survive on my own. I am feeling more and more like the real ENTJ. So what are the main differences between these two types of ENTJs? I am going to address that in our next episode. So I hope that this episode really gives you some insight into what a real life ENTJ is really like. Not very straightforward, not one-dimensional, more like an onion with a lot of layers. What do you think, fellow ENTJs? Do comment below. So if you have enjoyed this video, do give us a like, and if you have not subscribed, do consider subscribing so that we can bring you more MBTI, ENTJ, INTJ and fun stuff. Okay, I'm going to sign off now and I'll see you in our next episode. Bye bye.